They say legends are just stories. But what if some of them are true? Across quiet towns, deep forests, and lonely highways, people have reported seeing something unnatural, something with glowing eyes, claws that slice through bone, and a howl that freezes your soul. Tonight, you'll hear 5 terrifying true encounters with real werewolves. Tales whispered by those who lived to tell the tale, and some who almost didn't. So turn down the lights, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't look out the window. This is Top 5 Real Werewolf Encounters that will chill your bones. My name is Ethan Collins, and I'm a 27-year-old who used to think he had his whole life figured out. I had a steady job as a software developer in Detroit, a comfortable apartment, and a circle of friends I'd known since college. But all of that changed on one fateful camping trip that I can only describe as a descent into pure, unadulterated horror. What I experienced in Michigan's dense forests has left me a changed man, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at every shadow. I'm sharing this story not for fame or attention, but as a warning to anyone who thinks the legends of monsters are just that, legends. It was late October, and the crisp autumn air had settled over Michigan like a blanket. The trees were ablaze with fiery reds and golden yellows, a beautiful sight that masked the terror lurking within. My friends and I had planned this camping trip for months, eager to escape the city and immerse ourselves in nature before winter set in. There were 5 of us: myself, my best friend Jake, his girlfriend Sarah, and our mutual friends Mike and Lisa. We were all experienced campers, or so we thought. Nothing could have prepared us for what awaited in those woods. We set out early on a Friday morning, our SUV packed to the brim with camping gear, food, and enough beer to last us through the weekend. The drive to the Huron-Manistee National Forest was filled with laughter and excitement. We sang along to old rock classics, shared stories, and speculated about the adventures we'd have. If only we had known that those carefree moments would be our last. As we drove deeper into the forest, the roads became narrower, and the trees seemed to close in around us. The GPS signal flickered in and out, but we weren't concerned. We had a physical map as backup, and Jake had been to this area before, or so he claimed. Looking back, I wonder if his memory had played tricks on him, leading us further into the heart of something ancient and malevolent. We arrived at our campsite in the late afternoon. The sun was already beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long shadows across the small clearing we'd chosen. As we set up our tents and gathered wood for the fire, I couldn't shake an uneasy feeling that had settled in the pit of my stomach. The forest was eerily quiet. No bird song, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Just an oppressive silence that seemed to watch our every move. "Hey guys," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Doesn't it seem a bit too quiet out here?" Mike laughed, slapping me on the back. "City boy getting spooked already? Come on, Ethan. This is what real nature sounds like. No traffic, no sirens, just peace and quiet." I forced a smile and nodded, but the uneasiness remained. As darkness fell, we gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing ghost stories. The flames cast flickering shadows on the trees surrounding us, and more than once, I thought I saw something move just beyond the circle of light. But each time I looked, there was nothing there. It was close to midnight when we heard it, a long, mournful howl that echoed through the trees. We all froze, marshmallows forgotten on their sticks. "Was that a wolf?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Jake shook his head. "No way. There haven't been wolves in this part of Michigan for decades." "Then what was it?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, the howl came again, closer this time. It didn't sound like any wolf I'd ever heard. There was something almost human about it, a guttural, agonized sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Maybe we should head into our tents," I suggested, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. The others agreed quickly, and we doused the fire, plunging our campsite into darkness. As we scrambled into our tents, I could have sworn I heard the sound of heavy footsteps and branches snapping nearby. I zipped up my tent with shaking hands and lay in my sleeping bag, every muscle in my body tense. Sleep was impossible. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a twig had me sitting bolt upright, straining my ears in the darkness. The howls continued throughout the night, sometimes far away, sometimes so close I was sure whatever was making them was just outside my tent. By the time the first light of dawn filtered through the canvas, I was a nervous wreck. I unzipped my tent and poked my head out, half expecting to see a scene of carnage. But the campsite looked undisturbed. The others emerged from their tents looking as haggard and sleep-deprived as I felt. "Did you guys hear that all night?" Mike asked, his usual bravado gone. We all nodded, exchanging uneasy glances. "Maybe we should pack up and head back," Sarah suggested. "I don't feel safe here." Part of me wanted to agree, to flee back to the safety of civilization. But another part, a part I didn't fully understand, wanted to stay, to investigate, to find out what was out there in these woods. "Let's give it one more day," I heard myself saying. "It was probably just some animal. We came all this way, we might as well try to enjoy ourselves." The others reluctantly agreed, though I could see the fear lingering in their eyes. We spent the day hiking, trying to shake off the unease from the night before. But as we walked deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. More than once I caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, only to turn and find nothing there. The trees seemed to grow denser, the undergrowth more tangled. I realized with a start that I had no idea which direction we'd come from. When I mentioned this to Jake, who was leading our hike, he just shrugged it off. "I've got a compass," he said, pulling it out of his pocket. But as he looked at it, his face paled. The needle was spinning wildly, never settling on a direction. That's not possible," he muttered. As the sun began to set, panic set in. We were lost in an increasingly hostile forest, with no idea how to get back to our campsite. And somewhere out there, something was howling. "We need to find shelter," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "We can't be out here after dark." We stumbled through the gathering gloom, branches whipping at our faces, roots seeming to reach up to trip us. The howls were getting closer, more frequent. And now in the fading light, I could have sworn I saw pairs of eyes gleaming in the shadows between the trees. Just as despair was about to overwhelm us, we stumbled into a small clearing. In the center stood an old dilapidated cabin. Its windows were dark, the wood weathered and rotting in places. But it was shelter, and right now, that was all that mattered. We approached cautiously, calling out to see if anyone was inside. When no answer came, Mike tried the door. To our surprise, it swung open with a creak that seemed to echo through the forest. The interior of the cabin was dusty and cobweb-covered, clearly abandoned for years. But it was dry, and more importantly, it had walls and a door we could close against whatever was out there. We huddled together in the main room, using our flashlights sparingly to conserve battery. As night fell, the howls grew louder, more frenzied. They seemed to be coming from all around us now, as if we were surrounded. And then we heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the cabin's porch. Something was out there, moving around the cabin, testing the walls. We could hear sniffing, scratching, the low rumble of growls that were too deep, too guttural to be any normal animal. Sarah began to cry softly and Jake held her close, his own eyes wide with terror. And then, suddenly, it all stopped. The forest fell silent once more. We waited, barely breathing, for what felt like hours. Slowly, cautiously, I approached one of the windows, peering out into the darkness. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my days. Standing in the clearing, illuminated by the pale moonlight, was a creature straight out of a nightmare. It stood on two legs like a man, but it was covered in thick, matted fur. Its arms were too long, ending in hands tipped with vicious claws. But it was the face that struck true terror into my heart. It was a twisted amalgamation of human and wolf, with an elongated snout full of razor-sharp teeth and eyes that glowed with an unholy, intelligent malevolence. A werewolf. There was no other word for it. All the legends, all the stories I'd dismissed as fantasy came rushing back to me. This creature, this monster, was real, and it was hunting us. As if sensing my gaze, the creature turned its head toward the window. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew it was aware of us. A slow, terrible grin spread across its muzzle, revealing row upon row of gleaming teeth. I stumbled back from the window, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. "We need to barricade the doors and windows," I gasped out. "Now!" The others, seeing the terror on my face, didn't question me. We moved quickly, pushing what little furniture there was against the door and windows. But even as we worked, we could hear more of them gathering outside. Howls and growls filled the air, punctuated by the sound of claws scraping against wood. "What are they?" Lisa whispered, her face pale in the dim light of our flashlights. "Werewolves," I said, the word feeling strange and terrifying on my tongue. "I know it sounds crazy, but I saw one. They're real, and they're out there." Disbelief warred with fear on my friends' faces, but the sounds from outside left little room for doubt. Something inhuman was trying to get in, and we were trapped. The night that followed was the longest of my life. The werewolves, for I was now certain there were multiple, circled the cabin endlessly. They threw themselves against the walls, making the whole structure shudder. Claws raked across the roof, and more than once, a furry arm smashed through a window, only to be withdrawn before we could react. We huddled together in the center of the room, armed with nothing more than some broken chair legs and a hunting knife Mike had brought along. We were hopelessly outmatched, and we all knew it. Our only hope was to somehow survive until dawn, praying that the creatures would retreat with the coming of the sun. As the attacks continued, we began to hear something else mixed in with the growls and howls. Words, distorted, guttural, but unmistakably human speech. "Come out, little piggies," a voice rasped, followed by a chorus of chilling laughter. "We only want to play." "Oh God," Sarah sobbed. "They can talk. How can they talk?" None of us had an answer. The very foundations of our reality were crumbling around us, replaced by a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. Hours passed, each minute an eternity of terror. The werewolves seemed to be toying with us, their attacks coming in waves. They would assault the cabin furiously for a time, then retreat, leaving us in tense silence before beginning again. During one of these lulls, Mike spoke up. "We can't just sit here and wait to die," he said, his voice hoarse. "We need to try to escape." "And go where?" Jake shot back. "We're lost in the middle of the forest, surrounded by monsters. We'd be torn apart before we made it 10 feet. "We have to try something," Mike insisted. Maybe we could make a run for it. Split up, try to confuse them." The idea was met with horrified silence. The thought of facing those creatures alone in the dark forest was almost too much to bear. But as another assault on the cabin began, the wood creaking and groaning under the onslaught, we realized we might not have a choice. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If we're going to do this, we need a plan. We'll wait for their next retreat, then we make a break for it. Run in different directions. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run and pray." The others nodded grimly. We distributed what meager weapons we had, the chair legs, Mike's knife, a heavy flashlight. Then we waited, every muscle tense, for the next lull in the attack. When it came, we moved with desperate speed. Jake wrenched the barricade away from the door, and we burst out into the night. The cool air hit me like a physical force after the stuffy interior of the cabin. For a split second, I dared to hope. Maybe we'd caught them off guard. Maybe we had a chance. Then the howls began. I ran blindly into the forest, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. Behind me, I could hear the others crashing through the undergrowth, their panicked breathing and occasional cries of terror spurring me on. But louder than all of that were the sounds of pursuit. The werewolves moved through the forest with terrifying ease, their howls growing closer with each passing second. I could hear them calling to each other, coordinating their hunt with chilling efficiency. I don't know how long I ran. Time lost all meaning in that nightmarish chase. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but terror kept me moving. Every shadow seemed to hide a snarling beast. Every rustle of leaves promised imminent death. And then I heard a scream, high-pitched, filled with agony and cut off abruptly. I didn't know who it was. In that moment of pure animal panic, I didn't even try to identify the voice. I just ran harder, tears streaming down my face. More screams followed. The forest echoed with the sounds of my friends dying, their final moments a symphony of terror that I knew would haunt me forever. But still I ran. What else could I do? I burst through a line of trees and found myself on the edge of a cliff. Below, a river rushed by, its waters black in the moonlight. Behind me, I could hear the werewolves approaching, their excited howls telling me they knew their prey was cornered. In that moment, I made a choice. I'd rather die on my own terms than be torn apart by those monsters. Without allowing myself time to think, I leaped off the cliff. The fall seemed to last forever. The wind rushed past me, and for a brief, insane moment, I felt almost peaceful. Then I hit the water, and the cold shocked me back to reality. The current was strong, threatening to pull me under, but some instinct for survival I didn't know I possessed took over. I fought against the water, managing to keep my head above the surface as the river carried me swiftly away from the howls of frustration echoing from the clifftop. I don't know how long I was in that river. It could have been minutes or hours. All I know is that eventually I washed up on a rocky shore, battered, freezing, but alive. As the first light of dawn broke over the trees, I dragged myself onto land and collapsed. I was found later that day by a search and rescue team. Apparently, when we hadn't returned to our campsite, the park rangers had been alerted. I was the only one they found. My friends were gone. In the days and weeks that followed, I tried to tell people what had happened. About the werewolves, about the hunt, about the horrors we'd faced in those woods. But no one believed me. They said I was in shock, that I'd imagined it all to cope with the trauma of getting lost in the forest. They told me my friends had probably fallen victim to a bear attack or gotten separated and succumbed to the elements. But I know the truth. I know what's out there, hiding in the dark places of the world. And I know that one day they'll come for me again. Because once you've been marked by the werewolves, you're never truly safe. So I'm sharing my story now as a warning. If you value your life, your sanity, stay out of Michigan's forests. Don't dismiss the old legends and campfire tales, because sometimes the monsters are real and they're hungry. My name is Jack Thompson, and I'm about to tell you a story that will chill you to your very core. It's a tale of terror, survival, and the horrifying truth about what lurks in the shadows of the Catskill Mountains. I never believed in monsters or the supernatural, but after what I experienced, I'll never look at the world the same way again. It all began on a crisp autumn evening in October. I had just turned 25 and decided to celebrate by taking a solo camping trip in the Catskills. As an avid hiker and outdoorsman, I thought I was prepared for anything nature could throw at me. How wrong I was. I arrived at the campsite late in the afternoon, the sun already beginning to dip behind the towering trees. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decaying leaves, and an eerie silence hung over the forest. As I set up my tent, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. "Just your imagination, Jack," I muttered to myself, trying to calm my nerves. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. As night fell, I built a small fire and sat beside it, listening to the crackling flames and the occasional hoot of an owl. The moon rose, full and bright, casting long shadows across the clearing. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My heart began to race as I scanned the tree line, searching for the source of the sound. The growl came again, closer this time, and I caught a glimpse of something moving in the darkness. Two glowing eyes reflected the firelight, and I froze in terror. Slowly, a massive shape emerged from the shadows. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. A creature that walked on two legs but was covered in thick, matted fur. Its snout was long and filled with razor-sharp teeth, and its claws looked capable of tearing a man to shreds in seconds. A werewolf. The word flashed through my mind, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But there was no denying the nightmarish creature that stood before me. In that moment, survival instinct kicked in. I scrambled to my feet and ran, leaving everything behind. The sound of heavy footfalls and snarling filled the air as the beast gave chase. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face and tearing at my clothes. My lungs burned as I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. I could feel the creature's hot breath on the back of my neck, spurring me to run faster. In the distance, I saw a rocky outcropping and made a split-second decision. With the last of my strength, I hurled myself towards the rocks, squeezing into a narrow crevice just as the werewolf's claws raked across my back. I bit back a scream of pain and wedged myself deeper into the crevice, praying that the monster couldn't reach me. For hours, I huddled in that small space, listening to the werewolf's frustrated howls and the sound of its claws scraping against the rock. As dawn approached, the sounds finally faded, and I dared to peek out. The forest was quiet once more, but the ground around the rocks was torn up, with deep claw marks scarring the earth. My campsite was in shambles, my tent shredded to ribbons. It wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It had all been real. Shaken and bleeding, I made my way back to civilization, my mind reeling from what I had experienced. But my ordeal was far from over. As I would soon discover, that night in the Catskills was just the beginning of a terrifying journey that would lead me deep into the heart of an ancient curse and a desperate fight for survival. Over the next few weeks, I tried to convince myself that what I had seen was just a bear or some other large animal. But the wounds on my back, which healed far too quickly to be normal, told a different story. And then there were the dreams, vivid nightmares of running through moonlit forests, my body twisting and changing into something inhuman. I became obsessed with finding answers. I scoured the internet for information on werewolves, poring over ancient legends and modern sightings. Most of it seemed like nonsense, but there were enough consistencies to make me wonder if there was some truth hidden beneath the myths. One name kept appearing in my research: Dr. Elena Vasquez, a cryptozoologist who had been studying reported werewolf sightings in the Catskills for years. Despite the ridicule she faced from the scientific community, Dr. Vasquez remained convinced that there was something out there. It took some doing, but I finally managed to track her down and convince her to meet with me. When I showed her my scars and told her my story, her eyes lit up with a mix of excitement and fear. "You're lucky to be alive," she said, examining the nearly healed claw marks on my back. "And even luckier that you weren't bitten. According to the legends, a bite from a werewolf can pass on the curse." I felt a chill run down my spine. "So you believe me? You think what I saw was real?" Dr. Vasquez nodded solemnly. "I've been studying these creatures for years, but you're the first person I've met who's had such a close encounter and lived to tell about it. Your testimony could be the key to proving their existence." As we talked, Dr. Vasquez shared her theories about the werewolves of the Catskills. She believed they were part of an ancient bloodline, dating back centuries to when European settlers first came to the area. According to her research, the curse was passed down through generations, with some able to control their transformations better than others. "But why haven't they been discovered before now?" I asked. "They're incredibly intelligent and secretive," she explained. "They've learned to hide their true nature, blending in with human society. But during the full moon, their bestial side takes over, and that's when most sightings occur." The more we talked, the more I realized that my encounter in the woods was just the tip of the iceberg. There was an entire hidden world out there, one filled with danger and dark secrets. Dr. Vasquez proposed a plan. We would return to the Catskills during the next full moon to gather evidence, and if possible, make contact with the werewolves in their transformed state. It was risky, bordering on suicidal, but I knew I had to go back. I needed answers, and more importantly, I needed to know if I was truly safe, or if the curse was somehow affecting me. As the days passed and the full moon approached, we prepared for our expedition. Dr. Vasquez equipped us with cameras, infrared sensors, and other high-tech gear designed to capture proof of the werewolves' existence. I, on the other hand, was more concerned with our safety. I packed silver bullets, just in case the legends were true, and enough provisions to last us several days in the wilderness. The night before we left, I had the most vivid nightmare yet. I dreamed I was running through the forest on all fours, my body covered in thick fur, howling at the moon. When I woke up, I could have sworn I tasted blood in my mouth. The line between reality and nightmare was becoming increasingly blurred, and I feared what that might mean. As we drove up into the mountains, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Dr. Vasquez was practically buzzing with excitement, but I felt a growing sense of dread. We were walking into the lion's den, and I wasn't sure we'd make it out alive. We set up our base camp in a clearing not far from where I had my first encounter. As darkness fell, We activated our equipment and began our vigil. Hours passed with nothing but the usual sounds of the forest at night. And then, just as before, we heard the growl. Dr. Vasquez's eyes widened, and she fumbled with her camera. I reached for the gun loaded with silver bullets, my hands shaking slightly. The growl came again, closer this time, and then we saw them, a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness. "Don't move," Dr. Vasquez whispered, her camera whirring as it recorded. "Let it come to us." I wanted to run, to hide, to do anything but stand there as the creature emerged from the shadows. But I stood my ground, watching in horror and fascination as the werewolf revealed itself. It was just as terrifying as I remembered. Massive, muscular, with a wolf-like head atop a body that was a nightmarish blend of human and beast. But this time, I noticed details I had missed before. There was intelligence in those glowing eyes, a spark of something almost human. The werewolf sniffed the air, its gaze locked on us. For a moment I thought it might attack, but then something unexpected happened. It tilted its head as if curious and took a step closer. Dr. Vasquez, ever the scientist, began to speak softly. "We mean you no harm," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We just want to understand." To our amazement, the creature seemed to respond to her words. It sat back on its haunches, regarding us with an almost human-like expression of curiosity. And then, it did something that would change everything. It spoke. The voice was guttural and rough, barely recognizable as human, but the words were clear. "Why have you come back?" I nearly dropped the gun in shock. Dr. Vasquez gasped, her camera almost slipping from her grasp. The werewolf, this thinking, speaking creature, was addressing me directly. I needed to know the truth," I stammered, still struggling to process what was happening. "About what you are, about what happened to me that night." The werewolf's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I feared we had made a terrible mistake. But then it nodded, a surprisingly human gesture. "You are brave or perhaps foolish to return, but your curiosity may yet be your salvation or your doom." Over the next few hours, we engaged in one of the most surreal conversations of my life. The werewolf, who told us his name was Caleb, revealed that he was part of a pack that had lived in the Catskills for generations. They were not mindless beasts, but thinking, feeling beings cursed with a dual nature. Caleb explained that on the night of our first encounter, he had been newly transformed and struggling to control his bestial side. "I am sorry for the fear and pain I caused you," he said, his voice carrying a hint of remorse. "It is a constant battle to maintain our humanity during the full moon." Dr. Vasquez was beside herself with excitement, peppering Caleb with questions about werewolf biology, society, and history. I, however, had more pressing concerns. Am I going to become like you?" I asked, the fear I'd been holding back finally bubbling to the surface. "Ever since that night, I've been having these dreams, and my body has been changing in ways I can't explain." Caleb studied me intently, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. "You were not bitten, so you do not carry the full curse. But," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "your encounter with me has awakened something within you, a potential that has always been there, dormant in your bloodline." My head spun with this revelation. "What does that mean? Am I going to transform?" "Not fully," Caleb replied, "but you may develop some of our traits: enhanced senses, accelerated healing, increased strength. And on the full moon, you may feel the pull of the wild more strongly than ever before." As this information sank in, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. I wasn't going to become a full werewolf, but I wasn't entirely human anymore either. I was something in between, straddling two worlds. Our conversation with Caleb lasted until the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. As the sky lightened, he began to change, his form shifting and twisting until a naked man stood before us. In his human form, Caleb was a rugged-looking man in his 40s, with streaks of gray in his dark hair and eyes that held the wisdom of countless moons. "You must understand," he said, his voice now fully human, but still carrying the weight of his words. "Our existence must remain a secret. The world is not ready to know about us." Dr. Vasquez nodded eagerly. Of course, we won't tell anyone. But please, can we meet again? There's so much more to learn, to understand. Caleb considered this for a moment before nodding. We have lived in isolation for too long. Perhaps it is time for a bridge to be built between our worlds. But tread carefully. There are those among us who would not welcome this contact. As we prepared to leave, Caleb pulled me aside. Your path forward will not be easy, he said, his eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and warning. You are neither fully human nor fully wolf. You will need to find your own way to balance these two sides of yourself. I nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. What should I do? Return here during the next full moon, he said. I will teach you what I can about controlling the wild within you. But be warned, once you start down this path, there is no going back to the life you knew before. As Dr. Vasquez and I made our way back to civilization, my mind was reeling from everything we had learned. The world was far stranger and more wonderful than I had ever imagined, but it was also more dangerous. I knew that my life would never be the same, but I was determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Over the next few months, I returned to the Catskills during each full moon, meeting with Caleb and learning to harness my newfound abilities. Dr. Vasquez continued her research, documenting everything with scientific precision while keeping the true nature of her discoveries secret from the world. As I grew stronger and more in tune with my partial werewolf nature, I began to understand the responsibility that came with this knowledge. I became a protector of sorts, using my enhanced abilities to help others while keeping the secret of the werewolf safe. But our actions did not go unnoticed. There were other forces at work in the shadows, both human and supernatural, who saw our growing understanding as a threat. As the seasons changed and our knowledge grew, so too did the dangers we faced. Little did I know that my terrifying encounter in the woods was just the beginning of an even greater adventure, one that would test the limits of my humanity, challenge my understanding of the world, and forced me to confront the beast that now lived within my very soul. The months following my initial encounter with Caleb and the werewolves of the Catskills were a whirlwind of discovery, training, and increasing danger. Each full moon, I would return to the forest, where Caleb would teach me to harness and control my newfound abilities. I learned to sharpen my senses, to hear the faintest rustle of leaves from hundreds of yards away, to smell the lingering scent of a deer that had passed through hours before. My strength and speed increased dramatically, and wounds that would have taken weeks to heal now closed in days. But with these gifts came a price. As the full moon approached each month, I felt a wildness growing within me, a primal urge that threatened to overwhelm my human rationality. Caleb taught me techniques to maintain control: meditation, focusing exercises, and most importantly, accepting this new part of myself rather than fighting against it. The more you resist, the stronger the beast becomes, he explained during one of our sessions. You must learn to dance with your wild nature, to guide it rather than suppress it. Dr. Vasquez continued to document my transformation, running tests and recording data. Her excitement was palpable, but she respected Caleb's warnings about keeping their existence a secret. Instead, she focused on publishing carefully worded papers about unknown species in the Catskills, hinting at, but never fully revealing the truth. As my control grew, so did my curiosity about the wider world of werewolves. Caleb began to share more about their history and society. I learned that there were different packs scattered across the country, each with its own traditions and rules. Some, like Caleb's pack, sought to live in harmony with their human sides in the natural world. Others embraced their bestial nature more fully, seeing humans as little more than prey. There has long been a divide among our kind, Caleb explained one night as we sat around a small fire. Those who see our condition as a curse to be managed, and those who view it as a gift that elevates us above humanity. This schism has led to conflicts in the past, and I fear it may do so again. His words proved prophetic. As summer turned to fall, we began to notice signs that all was not well in the werewolf world. Caleb spoke of increased tensions between packs, of rumors that some were pushing for a more aggressive stance towards humans. And then there were the disappearances. At first it was just whispers, hikers going missing in remote areas, campers vanishing without a trace. But as the numbers grew, a pattern began to emerge. The disappearances were clustered around areas known to be werewolf territories, but not those of Caleb's pack. "Something is coming," Caleb warned during one of our meetings. "There are those among us who believe it's time to stop hiding, to claim our place as the apex predators we are. They see humans as weak, as little more than cattle, and they're gaining support." The gravity of the situation hit me hard. The secret world I had stumbled into was on the brink of war, and the unsuspecting human population was caught in the middle. I knew then that the knowledge and abilities I had gained came with a responsibility I couldn't ignore. "What can we do?" I asked, looking from Caleb to Dr. Vasquez. Caleb's expression was grim. "We must gather allies, both werewolf and human. There are those in positions of power who know of our existence. Law enforcement, government officials. It's time to bring them into the fold, to prepare for what's coming." Dr. Vasquez nodded in agreement. "I have contacts in various scientific and governmental organizations. It's risky, but I think I can arrange some discreet meetings." And so began the next phase of our journey. While continuing my training with Caleb, I also started working with Dr. Vasquez to carefully reveal the truth to selected individuals. It was a delicate balance, providing enough proof to be believed without causing panic or attracting unwanted attention. We met with forest rangers who had encountered strange phenomena in the woods, detectives puzzling over unsolved disappearances, and even a few open-minded politicians who recognized the potential threat. Slowly, carefully, we built a network of allies, human and werewolf alike, united in the goal of preventing an all-out war between species. But our efforts didn't go unnoticed. As we worked to build alliances, we also found ourselves being hunted. It started with subtle signs. The feeling of being watched, mysterious figures glimpsed at the edge of the forest. Then came the attacks. The first happened on a night when I was patrolling the outskirts of Caleb's territory. A group of werewolves, larger and more feral than any I had seen before, ambushed me. Their eyes glowed with a reddish tint, and their movements were jerky, almost rabid. It was only thanks to my training and enhanced abilities that I managed to escape, but not without injury. As Caleb tended to my wounds, his face was etched with worry. "These were not natural werewolves," he said, examining the deep gashes on my arm. "Something has changed them, twisted their nature. I fear our enemies are growing stronger and more desperate." The attacks continued, targeting not just me and Caleb, but also members of his pack and even some of our human allies. We were forced to go on the defensive, setting up safe houses and developing new protocols to protect ourselves and our network. Through it all, the pull of my own wild nature grew stronger. Each full moon became a battle not just against external threats, but against the beast within me. There were nights when I would wake up in the forest, miles from where I had started, with no memory of how I got there. The line between man and wolf was blurring, and I feared losing myself entirely. It was during one of these moments of internal struggle that I had a breakthrough. Exhausted from fighting against my nature, I finally surrendered to it, letting the wild flow through me without resistance. To my amazement, instead of being overwhelmed, I found a new level of clarity and control. My senses sharpened beyond anything I had experienced before, and I could feel a deep connection to the forest around me. In that moment of perfect balance between man and wolf, I sensed something that chilled me to my core. There was a wrongness in the air, a scent of corruption that seemed to seep from the very ground. Following this sensation, I found myself deep in a part of the forest I had never explored before. There, hidden in a secluded valley, I discovered the source of our troubles. A group of rogue werewolves had set up a camp, but it was unlike anything Caleb had described. These creatures were experimenting on themselves and others, using a combination of ancient rituals and modern science to enhance their bestial nature at the cost of their humanity. I watched in horror as they forced their transformation on captured humans, creating the feral, red-eyed werewolves that had been attacking us. It was a perversion of everything Caleb had taught me about the balance between man and wolf. Slipping away undetected, I raced back to warn Caleb and Dr. Vasquez. The information I had gathered confirmed our worst fears. This rogue group was planning to create an army of enhanced werewolves, with the goal of revealing their existence to the world and establishing themselves as the dominant species. We knew then that time was running out. The delicate balance between the human world and the hidden realm of werewolves was on the verge of shattering. If we didn't act soon, the consequences would be catastrophic. As we gathered our allies and prepared for the confrontation that we knew was coming, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. From a skeptical hiker who didn't believe in monsters, I had become a bridge between two worlds, carrying the weight of both on my shoulders. The final battle was approaching, and the fate of both humans and werewolves hung in the balance. The skills I had learned, the alliances we had forged, and the delicate balance I had found within myself would all be put to the ultimate test. As the next full moon rose over the Catskill Mountains, casting its silvery light over the ancient forests, I steeled myself for what was to come. The night was alive with tension, the air thick with the scent of impending conflict. This was it, the moment that would determine the future of two species and my place within both worlds. Our plan was as dangerous as it was desperate. Using the network we had built, we had managed to gather a coalition of Caleb's pack, sympathetic werewolves from other territories, and a select group of human allies who understood the gravity of the situation. Our goal was to strike at the heart of the rogue werewolves' operation, putting an end to their experiments and preventing their planned revelation of werewolf existence to the world. As we moved through the forest in small groups, I found myself at the forefront with Caleb and Dr. Vasquez. My enhanced senses were on high alert, every snapped twig and rustling leaf a potential threat. The corrupted scent I had detected earlier was stronger now, a miasma that seemed to taint the very air around us. We approached the hidden valley where I had discovered the rogue werewolves' camp. The scene that greeted us was even more nightmarish than before. The valley floor was dotted with cages containing humans in various stages of forced transformation, their agonized howls piercing the night. At the center of it all stood a massive bonfire, around which dozens of red-eyed, feral werewolves danced in a frenzied ritual. "By the moon," Caleb whispered, his voice thick with horror. "They've gone completely mad." Dr. Vasquez's scientific curiosity warred with her obvious revulsion. The combination of ancient magic and modern science, it's created something entirely new and entirely dangerous. I felt the pull of the wild stronger than ever, the beast within me responding to the primal energy emanating from the valley. But instead of fighting it, I embraced it, finding that perfect balance I had discovered earlier. In that moment of clarity, I knew what had to be done. "We need to free the prisoners and destroy their research," I said, my voice carrying a new note of authority. "But most importantly, we need to stop whoever is leading this." As if in response to my words, a figure emerged from the largest tent in the camp. He was massive, even for a werewolf, with jet-black fur streaked with silver. His eyes glowed not with the feral red of his followers, but with an intelligent, calculating amber. This, I realized, was the mastermind behind it all. "Nathaniel," Caleb growled, recognition and anger mixing in his voice. I should have known he was behind this. He always sought power above all else. With a howl that shook the very ground, Nathaniel signaled to his followers. They turned as one, their red eyes fixing on our position. Our element of surprise was gone. "Now!" I shouted, and our coalition burst into action. What followed was a battle unlike anything I could have imagined. The night air filled with snarls, howls, and the sound of flesh tearing flesh. Our allies fought with everything they had, werewolves and humans working side by side against the twisted creations of Nathaniel's experiments. I found myself in the thick of the fight, my partially transformed state allowing me to move with inhuman speed and strength. I freed prisoners from their cages, fought off attackers, and worked my way toward the center of the camp, where Nathaniel stood, directing his forces with cruel efficiency. Dr. Vasquez, armed with tranquilizer guns loaded with a specially formulated sedative, moved through the chaos with surprising skill. She targeted the most frenzied of our opponents, dropping them before they could cause too much damage. Meanwhile, Caleb was a whirlwind of fur and claws, years of experience evident in every move he made. But for all our preparation, we were outnumbered. The feral werewolves fought with a berserker rage that made them formidable opponents. For everyone we took down, it seemed two more took their place. I saw allies fall, heard cries of pain and anguish from both sides, and felt the tide of battle turning against us. It was in this moment of near defeat that I locked eyes with Nathaniel across the battlefield. His amber gaze was filled with a mixture of triumph and disdain. With a roar, he began to make his way towards me, swatting aside anyone, friend or foe, who got in his way. I knew then that this was it, the final confrontation that would determine the outcome of this war. As Nathaniel approached, I felt a calm settle over me. All the training, all the struggles with my dual nature had led to this moment. "You're an abomination," Nathaniel snarled as he circled me. "Neither human nor true wolf. You don't belong in either world." "You're wrong," I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos around us. "I'm a bridge between worlds, proof that balance is possible. You're the one who has lost his way." With a roar of fury, Nathaniel lunged at me. The fight that ensued was like nothing I had experienced before. He was stronger, more experienced, his every move honed by years of embracing his bestial nature. But I was quicker, more adaptable, my human intellect working in perfect harmony with my wolf-enhanced body. We traded blows that would have killed a normal human, our regenerative abilities healing wounds almost as quickly as they were inflicted. The battle raged on, a microcosm of the larger conflict surrounding us. In Nathaniel, I saw the dark path I could have taken, sacrificing humanity for power, and in that recognition, I found my strength. As the fight reached its climax, I feinted to the left, drawing Nathaniel into overextending himself. In that split second of vulnerability, I struck. My claws found his throat, and with a twist, I ended the threat he posed once and for all. The death of their leaders seemed to break something in the feral werewolves. Some fled into the night, while others collapsed, the fight draining out of them. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, an eerie quiet settled over the battlefield. The aftermath was a blur of activity. We tended to the wounded, secured the prisoners, and began the process of cleaning up the evidence of the night's events. Dr. Vasquez, her clothes torn and bloodied, but her scientific curiosity undiminished, immediately set to work studying Nathaniel's research, determined to find a way to reverse the effects of his experiments. As I stood on the edge of the valley, watching the sunrise, I felt Caleb's presence beside me. "It's over," he said softly, "for now at least." I nodded, understanding the weight of his words. We had won this battle, but the war, the constant struggle to maintain the balance between human and wolf, between secrecy and revelation, would continue. "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the night's events. Caleb's eyes were filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope as he surveyed the valley. "We rebuild, we heal, and we continue to work towards a future where our two worlds can coexist in peace." As we made our way back through the forest, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. From that terrifying night when I first encountered Caleb, through months of learning and struggle, to this final climactic battle, I had been transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I was no longer just Jack Thompson, the avid hiker who ventured into the Catskills for a solitary camping trip. I was something more, a guardian of secrets, a protector of two worlds, a living bridge between human and wolf. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its warm rays chasing away the last shadows of the night. As we emerged from the forest, I took a deep breath, savoring the sense of the world around me. The rich earth, the blooming flowers, the lingering traces of the wild. I knew that challenges lay ahead. There would be wounds to heal, both physical and emotional. We would need to be vigilant against others who might follow in Nathaniel's footsteps. And always, there would be the delicate task of maintaining the secret of the werewolves' existence while forging connections with trustworthy humans. But for now, in this moment, I felt a sense of peace. I had found my place in a world far larger and more wondrous than I had ever dreamed. And whatever the future held, I was ready to face it. Not as man or wolf, but as both, in perfect balance. As we made our way back to civilization, the first stirrings of the human world reaching our ears, I smiled. The night had been long and filled with terror, but a new day was dawning, and in that dawn I saw the promise of a future where the line between myth and reality, between human and wolf, might finally begin to blur in a way that brought understanding rather than fear. The werewolf hunt that had begun as my personal nightmare had transformed into a quest for balance and coexistence. And though the hunt would likely never truly end, I was no longer prey, but a protector of both worlds. With one last look at the mountains that had changed my life forever, I stepped forward into the light of a new day, ready for whatever adventures and challenges awaited in the shadowy realm between two worlds. My name is William, and I'm about to tell you a story that will chill you to your very core. A tale of terror, survival, and the beast that stalks the shadowy forests of Alabama. I never believed in monsters, not really. Sure, I enjoyed a good horror movie now and then, but I always knew it was just fiction. That is, until that fateful night when everything I thought I knew about the world came crashing down around me. It all began on a crisp autumn evening. I had just turned 29, and to celebrate, I decided to take a solo camping trip in the Talladega National Forest. I've always been an outdoorsy type, and the idea of spending a few days alone in nature, away from the hustle and bustle of city life, seemed like the perfect way to mark another year of life. As I drove down the winding roads leading into the heart of the forest, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement mixed with a tinge of apprehension. The trees loomed tall and ancient on either side of the road, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, casting eerie shadows in the fading light. I tried to shake off the feeling, chalking it up to pre-trip jitters and too many horror movies. I arrived at my campsite just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. The spot I had chosen was secluded, nestled in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines and old-growth hardwoods. As I set up my tent and prepared a small fire, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a shiver down my spine. But I told myself it was just the local wildlife, curious about their new visitor. As night fell, I sat by the fire, roasting marshmallows and enjoying the peacefulness of the forest. The stars twinkled brightly overhead, unobscured by city lights. It was beautiful, serene, and for a moment I forgot about my earlier unease. That is, until I heard it, a long, mournful howl that echoed through the trees. My blood ran cold. Wolves in Alabama? That couldn't be right. I knew there were coyotes in the area, but this sound was different, deeper, more guttural, and somehow wrong. It sounded almost human, yet not quite. I told myself it was probably just some drunk campers playing a prank, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I decided to turn in early, hoping that sleep would calm my nerves. As I zipped up my tent and snuggled into my sleeping bag, I could hear the forest come alive with nighttime sounds. The hoot of an owl, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. But underneath it all was an unsettling silence, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by a blood-curdling scream. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, part human, part animal, filled with rage and hunger. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat up, straining my ears to hear more. The forest had gone deathly quiet. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Just an oppressive silence that seemed to press in on me from all sides. And then I heard it, the sound of heavy footsteps, moving slowly but deliberately through the underbrush. They were coming closer. I held my breath, hoping against hope that whatever was out there would pass me by. But the footsteps kept coming, closer and closer, until they stopped right outside my tent. I could hear heavy breathing, like a large animal panting after a hunt. And then, to my horror, I saw a shadow fall across the side of my tent. A massive, hunched figure that was definitely not human. With trembling hands, I reached for my flashlight. Part of me didn't want to see what was out there, but I knew I had to. As I flicked on the light, I heard a low growl that made every hair on my body stand on end. Slowly, I turned the beam towards the shadow. What I saw in that moment will haunt me for the rest of my days. It was a wolf, but not like any wolf I had ever seen. It stood on its hind legs, towering over my tent at easily 8 feet tall. Its body was a mass of corded muscle covered in thick, matted fur. But it was the face that truly terrified me. It was a nightmarish blend of wolf and human, with an elongated snout full of razor-sharp teeth and eyes that glowed with an unnatural amber light. Those eyes, they weren't the eyes of an animal. There was intelligence there, and a hunger that went beyond mere predatory instinct. For a moment we stared at each other, the beast and I separated only by the thin fabric of my tent. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move, unable to breathe. And then with a roar that shook me to my very soul, the creature attacked. Claws ripped through the tent like it was tissue paper. I scrambled backwards, my mind blank with terror, operating on pure survival instinct. I managed to grab my hunting knife, a gift from my father that I had brought along more for show than anything else. Just as the beast burst into the tent, the stench hit me first, a nauseating mix of wet dog, rotting meat, and something else, something unnatural. Then came the heat of its breath as it lunged for me. I lashed out blindly with the knife, feeling it connect with flesh. The creature howled in pain and rage, rearing back. In that split second, I saw my chance. I bolted from the shredded remains of my tent, running faster than I ever had in my life. Behind me, I could hear the monster recovering, its howl of rage turning into the sound of pursuit. I ran through the dark forest, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me at every step. I had no idea where I was going. All I knew was that I had to get away. The sound of the creature crashing through the underbrush behind me spurred me on, terror lending speed to my feet. But I knew I couldn't outrun it forever. It was faster, stronger, and knew these woods far better than I did. I needed a plan, and fast. As I ran, my mind raced, trying to remember anything I had ever read or seen about werewolves. Silver bullets? I didn't have any. Wolfsbane? I wouldn't know what it looked like, even if I had time to stop and pick flowers. Then I remembered. Water. In many legends, werewolves couldn't cross running water. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. I strained my ears, trying to hear over the sound of my own ragged breathing and pounding heart. There, faintly but growing louder, the sound of rushing water. I changed direction, heading towards the sound. The beast behind me roared in frustration, sensing that its prey was trying to escape. I could hear it getting closer, its hot breath practically on the back of my neck. Just when I thought my legs would give out, I burst through a line of trees and saw it. A wide, fast-flowing river, its waters black in the moonlight. Without hesitation, I leaped. The shock of the cold water drove the breath from my lungs, but I forced myself to swim, fighting against the current. Behind me, I heard a splash. The creature had jumped in after me. I swam with everything I had, my muscles screaming in protest. The current was strong, threatening to pull me under, but fear of what was behind me kept me going. I chanced to look back and saw the werewolf thrashing in the water, howling in fury. It seemed the legends were partly true. While the water didn't stop it completely, it was clearly struggling far more than any normal wolf would. The river carried me swiftly downstream, away from the monster. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I managed to drag myself onto the opposite bank, coughing and gasping for air. I looked back across the river, my heart in my throat. There on the other side stood the werewolf. It paced back and forth along the bank, those terrifying eyes fixed on me. But it didn't attempt to cross again. Instead, it threw back its head and let out a howl that echoed through the night. A howl that sounded almost human, a promise that this wasn't over. I didn't wait to see what it would do next. Soaked, exhausted, and still gripped by fear, I stumbled away from the river and into the unknown depths of the forest. The rest of that night was a blur of terror and exhaustion. I wandered through the dark woods, jumping at every sound, convinced that at any moment the werewolf would leap out at me. As the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, I finally stumbled upon a dirt road. I followed it, my feet bleeding and my body on the verge of collapse, until I reached a small gas station. The attendant looked at me like I was crazy when I burst in, babbling about werewolves and begging to use the phone. Looking back, I can't blame him. I must have been quite a sight, soaking wet, covered in cuts and bruises, with a wild look in my eyes. I called the police, but even as I was dialing, I knew they wouldn't believe me. Who would? A werewolf in Alabama? It sounded insane even to my own ears. So I lied. I told them I had been attacked by a large wolf or maybe a bear, that I had gotten lost in the woods while camping. They sent out a search party, but of course, they found nothing. No giant wolf tracks, no shredded tent, nothing to corroborate my story. In the days and weeks that followed, I tried to convince myself that it had all been a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by fear and isolation in the woods. But deep down, I knew the truth. The terror I had felt was too real, the memory of those glowing eyes too vivid to be a dream. I became obsessed with researching werewolf lore, trying to make sense of what had happened to me. I scoured the internet for similar stories, for any hint that I wasn't alone in what I had experienced. And slowly I began to uncover a terrifying truth. There were other stories, whispered tales of beastmen stalking the forests of the South. Most were dismissed as campfire tales or the ramblings of drunk hunters. But there were enough similarities, enough details that matched my own experience to convince me that I wasn't crazy. I learned of an old Cherokee legend about skinwalkers in the Appalachian Mountains. I found accounts of early Spanish explorers writing about wolfmen in the Alabama wilderness. And most chillingly, I discovered a pattern of disappearances in the Talladega National Forest, stretching back decades. Lone hikers and campers who vanished without a trace. As I dug deeper, I began to piece together a horrifying picture. The creature I had encountered wasn't just a random monster, it was something ancient, something that had been stalking these woods for centuries. And worse, I began to suspect it wasn't alone. There were reports of similar creatures in other parts of the country, the Beast of Bray Road in Wisconsin, the Dogmen of Michigan. Were they all connected? Part of some hidden society of werewolves living among us? The more I learned, the more questions I had, and the more I realized how little we truly know about the world we live in. But knowledge, while empowering, also brought new fears. If these creatures were real, if they had been living and hunting alongside humans for centuries, how had they remained hidden for so long? The implications were terrifying. It suggested a level of intelligence and organization that went far beyond mere animals. These weren't just mindless beasts, but thinking, planning predators. And then came the night terrors. Almost every night, I would jolt awake, drenched in sweat, the echo of a howl ringing in my ears. In my dreams, I was back in those dark woods, running for my life. Sometimes I would dream of the werewolf catching me, feeling its claws tear into my flesh. Other times, the dreams were even worse. I would see my own reflection, watching in horror as my face elongated into a snout, as fur sprouted from my skin. I became a shell of my former self. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I jumped at every shadow, flinched at every dog bark. My friends and family were worried, but how could I explain to them what was really going on? They would think I was crazy. Hell, sometimes I thought I was crazy. But then came the full moon, 1 month after my encounter in the woods. As the sun set and the moon rose, fat and yellow in the sky, I felt a strange restlessness come over me. My skin felt too tight, my senses seemed sharper. And there, at the edge of my hearing, I could swear I heard a howl. Panic gripped me. Had the bite of the werewolf infected me? Was I about to transform, to become the very thing that had terrorized me? I locked myself in my bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror, waiting for the change to come. But it never did. As the night wore on, the feeling of restlessness faded. By morning, I was exhausted but still human, yet the experience left me shaken. Even if I hadn't transformed, something had changed within me. I could feel it, a wildness lurking just beneath the surface of my skin. In the months that followed, I tried to rebuild my life. I went to therapy, telling my therapist a sanitized version of events, that I had a traumatic experience while camping, that I was struggling with anxiety and PTSD. It helped to a degree. I learned coping mechanisms, ways to ground myself when the panic and fear threatened to overwhelm me. But I knew I could never truly move on, never forget what I had seen. The knowledge of what was out there, hiding in the shadows of our world, had fundamentally changed me. I couldn't go back to my old life, couldn't pretend that the world was the safe, understandable place I had once believed it to be. So I made a decision. If I couldn't forget, then I would fight. I began training: martial arts, wilderness survival, marksmanship. I don't know if silver bullets are really effective against werewolves, but I learned to make them anyway. I stocked up on wolfsbane and other herbs mentioned in old legends. I also started reaching out to others who had similar experiences. Slowly, cautiously, I built a network of believers, people who had encountered things that couldn't be explained, who had brushed up against the supernatural and lived to tell the tale. Together, we shared information, supported each other, and prepared for the day when we might have to face these creatures again. But even as I armed myself with knowledge and skills, I knew the truth. I was forever changed by what had happened in those woods. Every full moon, I feel that same restlessness, that same wild energy coursing through my veins. I may not transform into a wolf, but something of the wolf now lives within me. And sometimes in the dead of night, when the moon is full and the wind carries the sound of a distant howl, I feel an answering call rise up within me. In those moments, I'm torn between terror and a strange, primal exhilaration. I know that someday, somehow, I'll find myself back in those dark woods, face to face with the werewolf once again. But this time, I'll be ready. As I sit here, writing this account of my experience, I can't help but wonder about the future. What will happen the next time I encounter the werewolf? Will my preparations be enough? Or am I fooling myself thinking I can stand against something so ancient and powerful? And what about the other creatures that might be out there, hiding in the shadows of our world? I don't have answers to these questions. All I know is that I can never go back to the person I was before that night in the Talladega National Forest. The world is a darker, more dangerous place than I ever imagined, but it's also more wondrous and mysterious. There are things out there beyond our understanding, creatures that defy our neat categories of possible and impossible. To those of you reading this, I have a warning and a plea. Be careful out there. The wilderness is beautiful, but it's also home to things we can scarcely imagine. If you find yourself alone in the woods and hear a howl that raises the hair on the back of your neck, trust your instincts. Run, hide, do whatever you need to do to survive. But also keep your eyes open. Look for the signs that most people miss. There's a hidden world all around us, and once you start to see it, you can never unsee it. It's terrifying, yes, but it's also incredible. We are not alone in this world, not by a long shot. And if you've had an experience like mine, if you've encountered something that you can't explain, know that you're not crazy, you're not alone. There are others out there like you, like me. Find us, join us. Together we can uncover the truth about the creatures that stalk the night. As for me, I know my story isn't over. The werewolf is still out there, somewhere in the dark forests of Alabama. Maybe it's hunting other unsuspecting campers. Maybe it's watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. Or maybe, just maybe, it's struggling with its own nature, trapped between the human and animal worlds. Whatever the case, I'll be ready. Every full moon, I stand at my window, looking out at the silvery landscape, my hand on the knife I now always carry, the same knife that drew the werewolf's blood on that fateful night, and I wonder, not for the first time, if it's looking back at me. The Werewolf of Alabama changed my life forever. It opened my eyes to a world I never knew existed, and while I wouldn't wish my experience on anyone, I can't help but feel that, in some strange way, I'm now more alive than I've ever been. Every day is a gift, every moment precious, because I know firsthand how quickly it can all be taken away. So if you're reading this, remember my story. Remember that the world is stranger and more dangerous than you can imagine, but also remember that we humans are stronger than we know. We can face the darkness, we can survive the impossible, and who knows? Maybe one day we'll uncover all the secrets that the night keeps hidden. Until then, I'll be here, watching, waiting, and listening for the howl of the werewolf that stalks the southern wilds. My name is Anthony, and I'm about to tell you a story that will chill you to your very core. A tale of horror and survival that unfolded in the seemingly innocent streets of Orlando, Florida. I was just an ordinary 30-year-old man, living an unremarkable life until that fateful night when everything changed. The night I encountered the Werewolf of Orlando. It was a balmy evening in late October. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of approaching rain hung heavy in the atmosphere. I had just finished a late shift at the local tech startup where I worked as a software developer. Exhausted but restless, I decided to take a detour through one of Orlando's many parks on my way home. Little did I know this simple decision would plunge me into a nightmare beyond my wildest imagination. As I strolled along the dimly lit path, the distant rumble of thunder echoed through the night. The park was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. I should have known better than to be out alone so late, but I had always felt safe in this city. That false sense of security would soon be shattered. The first sign that something was amiss came in the form of an unnatural silence. The chirping of crickets and the calls of night birds suddenly ceased, as if nature itself was holding its breath in anticipation of something terrible. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a chill ran down my spine despite the warm night air. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very shadows themselves. My heart began to race as I scanned the darkness, searching for the source of that inhuman sound. For a moment, I convinced myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, a result of too many late nights and too much caffeine. But then I saw them, two glowing yellow eyes peering at me from the undergrowth. They were unlike anything I had ever seen before, filled with a primal hunger that sent waves of terror coursing through my body. I stood frozen, unable to move, as the creature slowly emerged from its hiding place. What I saw defied all logic and reason. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall when standing on its hind legs. Its body was covered in thick, matted fur that seemed to absorb the meager light around it. But it was the face that truly horrified me. A grotesque mixture of human and wolf features, with a elongated snout filled with razor-sharp teeth and ears that twitched and swiveled, catching every sound. In that moment, I knew I was face to face with a werewolf. The rational part of my mind screamed that this was impossible, that such creatures existed only in movies and folklore. But the primal part of my brain, the part hardwired for survival, knew the truth. This was real and I was in mortal danger. The werewolf's muscles tensed and I knew it was about to pounce. In that split second, my paralysis broke and I turned to run. I had never been much of an athlete, but terror lent wings to my feet as I sprinted down the path, my lungs burning and my heart threatening to burst from my chest. Behind me, I could hear the creature's pounding footsteps and its ragged breathing. The sound spurred me on, pushing me to run faster than I ever had before. I darted between trees, leaped over benches, and zigzagged through the park, desperately trying to lose my pursuer. But the werewolf was relentless. No matter how fast I ran or how many turns I took, I could feel its hot breath on the back of my neck. Its howls echoed through the night, a sound of pure savagery that seemed to freeze the blood in my veins. As I burst out of the park and onto the city streets, I dared to hope that I might find safety among the buildings and cars. Surely in the heart of Orlando, someone would see my plight and come to my aid. But the streets were deserted, the windows of homes and businesses dark and lifeless. I ran down the middle of the road, screaming for help, but my cries seemed to be swallowed by the night. The werewolf was gaining on me, its claws scraping against the asphalt as it loped along on all fours. I could smell its rank, animal odor, a mixture of wet fur and something metallic that I feared might be blood. In my panic, I took a wrong turn and found myself in a dead-end alley. My heart sank as I realized my terrible mistake. I turned to face my pursuer, my back pressed against the cold brick wall. The werewolf slowed its approach, almost seeming to savor the moment. Its yellow eyes gleamed with malicious intelligence, and its lips pulled back in a horrifying parody of a smile, revealing rows of dagger-like teeth. As it drew closer, I could see the details of its monstrous form more clearly. Its hands were a disturbing blend of human and animal, with elongated fingers tipped with cruel, curved claws. Saliva dripped from its jaws, and I could see chunks of what looked horribly like human flesh caught between its teeth. The creature reared up on its hind legs, towering over me. I closed my eyes, certain that my last moments had come, I thought of my family, my friends, all the things I had left undone in my life. I waited for the searing pain of those terrible claws tearing into my flesh, but the attack never came. Instead, I heard a sharp whistle and the sudden yelp of the werewolf. My eyes flew open to see a figure standing at the entrance of the alley, brandishing what looked like a silver sword. The werewolf had retreated a few steps, eyeing the newcomer warily. "Run!" the figure shouted at me. "Get to safety!" I didn't need to be told twice. As the werewolf's attention was divided, I bolted past it, feeling the rush of air as its claws narrowly missed my back. I ran out of the alley and down the street, not daring to look back. The sounds of combat echoed behind me, growls, the clash of metal, and human shouts of exertion. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing on the steps of a church several blocks away. My whole body shook with exhaustion and residual terror. As I sat there gasping for breath, I tried to make sense of what had just happened. A werewolf in Orlando? A mysterious sword-wielding savior? It all seemed too fantastic to be real. But I knew what I had seen. The memory of those yellow eyes and savage teeth was burned into my mind. As my breathing slowly returned to normal, I realized that my world had changed forever. The veil of normalcy had been torn away, revealing a darker, more dangerous reality lurking just beneath the surface. I managed to make it home that night, locking every door and window and huddling in my bedroom with the lights on. Sleep was impossible. Every sound made me jump, convinced that the werewolf had somehow found me again. As the first rays of dawn began to creep through my window, I made a decision. I couldn't just go back to my normal life and pretend this hadn't happened. I needed answers. Who was my mysterious savior? Were there more werewolves out there? And most importantly, how could I protect myself and others from this hidden threat? Little did I know this was just the beginning of my journey into the supernatural underbelly of Orlando. In the days and weeks that followed, I would uncover a world of ancient curses, secret societies, and monsters that defied explanation. My ordinary life was over, replaced by a constant struggle for survival and a quest for the truth. But that night in the park, face to face with the werewolf of Orlando, was where it all began. It was the night I learned that the darkness holds secrets, and sometimes those secrets have teeth. As I sit here now, recounting this tale, I can't help but glance nervously at the window. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It's beautiful, but I can't appreciate it anymore, because I know what comes with the night. I know what's out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the unwary. So let my story be a warning to you. The next time you're walking alone at night and you hear an odd sound or see a strange shadow, don't dismiss it. Don't tell yourself it's just your imagination. Because in this world of ours, there are things that defy explanation. Things with claws and fangs and an insatiable hunger. And sometimes those things come to Orlando. In the days following my terrifying encounter with the werewolf, I found myself unable to return to my normal life. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, and the setting sun filled me with a dread I had never known before. I called in sick to work, unable to face the outside world, and spent my time researching werewolf lore online. Most of what I found seemed like pure fantasy, but after what I had seen, I was willing to believe almost anything. It was on the third day of my self-imposed isolation that I heard a knock at my apartment door. My heart leaped into my throat, and for a wild moment, I imagined the werewolf had somehow tracked me down. But when I peered through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. She was in her mid-40s with streaks of gray in her dark hair and a face that spoke of both kindness and hardship. Against my better judgment, I opened the door a crack, the chain still in place. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. The woman's eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of understanding in them. "My name is Elena," she said softly, "and I believe we need to talk, Anthony. About what you saw in the park." My blood ran cold. How did this stranger know my name? How did she know about the werewolf? But something in her manner, a sense of shared experience perhaps, made me unlatch the chain and let her in. Elena settled herself on my couch, her posture straight and alert. "I know you have questions," she began, "and I'm here to provide some answers. But first, I need you to understand that by letting you into this world, I'm putting both of us at risk. Are you sure you want to know the truth? I nodded without hesitation. There was no going back to blissful ignorance now. Tell me everything, I said. And so Elena began to unfold a tale that was both fantastic and terrifying. She spoke of an ancient curse that had followed certain bloodlines for centuries, of people who transformed into savage beasts under the light of the full moon. But more than that, she spoke of a secret war that had been raging in the shadows of human society for generations. The werewolf you encountered, Elena explained, is part of a pack that has recently moved into Orlando. They're led by a particularly vicious alpha named Fenris, who believes that werewolves should rule over humans openly rather than hiding in the shadows. But why Orlando? I asked, struggling to reconcile this hidden world with the city I thought I knew. Elena's expression darkened. Orlando is a city of transients and tourists. People come and go all the time. It's easy for disappearances to go unnoticed or be explained away. Plus, the abundance of parks and wooded areas provides perfect hunting grounds. The casual way she spoke of hunting sent a shiver down my spine. I thought of all the missing persons reports I'd seen on the local news over the years, never imagining the horrific truth behind them. So what do we do? I asked, surprised by my use of we. But I knew deep down that I was already committed to this fight. I couldn't stand by and let innocent people fall prey to these monsters. Elena smiled, but it was a grim expression. We fight back. There's a network of hunters and other gifted individuals who work to keep the supernatural world in check. I'm one of them. And now, whether you like it or not, you're involved too. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden box. Opening it, she revealed a silver pendant in the shape of a wolf's head. This is infused with wolfsbane and blessed silver, she explained. It won't stop a werewolf, but it will slow one down and cause it pain. Never take it off. As I fastened the pendant around my neck, I felt the weight of my new reality settling onto my shoulders. What's our next move? I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. We prepare, Elena said firmly. The next full moon is in 2 weeks. That's when Fenris and his pack will be at their strongest, and when they're most likely to make a big move. We need to be ready. And so began my crash course in monster hunting. Elena introduced me to a hidden network of individuals dedicated to protecting the unsuspecting public from supernatural threats. There was Michael, a grizzled ex-Marine who specialized in weapons that could harm werewolves. Sarah, a soft-spoken librarian with an encyclopedic knowledge of folklore and mythology. And Diego, a young man with a quick wit and quicker reflexes who had lost his sister to a werewolf attack and had dedicated his life to vengeance. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned more than I ever thought possible. How to recognize the signs of werewolf activity, the most effective ways to wound or kill a werewolf, the politics and power struggles within werewolf packs. It was a lot to take in, and there were moments when I felt overwhelmed by it all. But the memory of those yellow eyes in the park and the thought of innocent people falling victim to these creatures kept me going. As the full moon approached, tension within our group mounted. Elena's sources reported increased werewolf activity throughout the city. People were going missing at an alarming rate, and there were whispers of a big hunt planned for the night of the full moon. The night before the full moon, we gathered in an abandoned warehouse that served as our base of operations. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. Elena laid out a map of Orlando on a makeshift table, marking the areas where werewolf activity had been highest. We believe Fenris is planning something big, she said, her finger tracing a circle around Lake Eola Park. A mass attack, right in the heart of downtown. He wants to create chaos, to reveal the existence of werewolves to the world at large. But why? I asked, still struggling to understand the motivations of these creatures. Wouldn't exposing themselves put them at risk? Diego, cleaning a silver-bladed knife nearby, snorted. Fenris is a true believer. He thinks werewolves are superior to humans in every way. In his mind, exposure is the first step to domination. Elena nodded grimly. Our job is to stop this attack before it can begin. We'll split into teams, cover the likely entry points to the park. Remember your training, stick to the plan, and above all, watch each other's backs. As we prepared our weapons and equipment, I caught sight of my reflection in a dusty window. I hardly recognized myself. Gone was the soft-bodied software developer, replaced by someone leaner, harder. My eyes held a haunted look that I suspected would never fully go away. I thought of my old life, of the family and friends I had distanced myself from for their own protection. For a moment, I allowed myself to mourn for the person I used to be, but then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Sarah, her kind eyes full of understanding. "It's okay to be scared," she said softly. "We all are. But what we're doing here, it matters. We're saving lives." I nodded, squaring my shoulders. She was right. There was no going back, only forward. And if going forward meant facing down a pack of bloodthirsty werewolves, then so be it. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, we moved out. I was paired with Diego, tasked with covering the western approach to Lake Eola. As we made our way through the darkening streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Stay sharp," Diego muttered, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. "They'll be out in force tonight." We had just reached the edge of the park when we heard it, a long, mournful howl that seemed to shake the very air around us. It was answered by another, then another, until the night was filled with a chorus of inhuman voices. Diego's face went pale. "There's too many," he whispered. "They must have called in reinforcements from other packs." Before I could respond, a dark shape burst from the bushes to our right. Diego reacted with lightning speed, his silver knife flashing in the moonlight. The werewolf, a smaller one, possibly a newly turned member of the pack, let out a yelp of pain as the blade sliced across its muzzle. But it wasn't alone. More shapes emerged from the darkness, eyes glowing with feral hunger. We were surrounded. "Run!" Diego shouted, already turning to sprint towards the more open area of the park. I didn't need to be told twice, my feet pounding the pavement as I ran for my life. The sounds of pursuit filled my ears, the heavy breathing of the werewolves, the scratch of claws on concrete, the occasional pained yelp as one of our silver weapons found its mark. But there were too many of them, and they were faster than us. As we burst into the open area around Lake Eola, I saw that we weren't the only ones in trouble. The other teams were engaged in desperate battles all around the park. The night air was filled with the sounds of combat, gunshots, howls of pain and rage, and all too human screams. I saw Elena locked in combat with a massive werewolf that could only be Fenris himself. She was a blur of motion, her silver sword flashing as she parried the alpha's savage attacks. But even from a distance, I could see that she was tiring. A weight slammed into my back, sending me sprawling to the ground. Hot breath washed over my neck as powerful jaws snapped shut inches from my throat. I rolled, desperately trying to bring my weapon to bear, but the werewolf was too strong, too fast. As those terrible teeth descended towards my face, I had a moment of perfect clarity. I saw the moon reflected in the werewolf's eyes, full and bright above us. I saw the chaos unfolding around the park, hunters and werewolves locked in mortal combat. And I saw, with a certainty that surprised me, that this was where I was meant to be. I wasn't just fighting for my own survival anymore. I was fighting for every person in Orlando who had no idea of the danger that stalked their streets. I was fighting for the memory of every victim who had fallen prey to these monsters. I was fighting for a world where the darkness didn't win. With a surge of strength I didn't know I possessed, I brought my silver-infused knife up and plunged it into the werewolf's chest. The creature's eyes widened in shock and pain, a very human expression of surprise crossing its monstrous features before it collapsed on top of me. I pushed the heavy body off, gasping for air. Diego was at my side in an instant, helping me to my feet. "Nice work," he said, a note of respect in his voice. "But this isn't over yet." He was right. All around us, the battle raged on. Fenris had Elena on the defensive now, her sword strokes becoming slower as exhaustion set in. Other werewolves were breaking through our lines, heading towards the populated areas of downtown. "We need to end this," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "We need to take out Fenris." Diego nodded grimly. "Easier said than done, but you're right. Cut off the head and the body dies. You up for a suicide mission?" I looked at the silver knife in my hand, still dripping with werewolf blood. I thought of my old life, of the person I used to be, and I knew without a doubt what I had to do. "Let's do it," I said. We moved through the chaos of the battlefield, dodging snapping jaws and slashing claws. Other hunters saw what we were doing and moved to support us, creating a path through the melee. As we approached Fenris and Elena, I could see that the hunter was on her last legs. Her sword arm was bleeding heavily, and her movements were becoming sluggish. Fenris, by contrast, seemed to be growing stronger, feeding off the chaos and bloodshed around him. "Hey, ugly!" Diego shouted, drawing the alpha's attention. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size?" Fenris turned, his massive form towering over us. Up close, he was even more terrifying than I had imagined. His fur was a patchwork of scars, testament to countless battles. His eyes gleamed with a malevolent intelligence that was far more frightening than mere animal savagery. "Ah, the new blood," Fenris growled, his voice a rumbling bass that seemed to vibrate in my chest. "Come to die with the old guard?" "We've come to stop you," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. "This ends tonight." Fenris threw back his head and laughed, a sound that was equal parts human amusement and bestial snarl. "Brave words, little man, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. I am power incarnate. I am the future of both our races." He lunged forward with shocking speed, his claws raking the air where my head had been a moment before. Diego and I separated, trying to flank the massive werewolf. But Fenris was too fast, too strong. He batted Diego aside like a rag doll, sending him crashing into a nearby tree. I slashed with my knife, managing to open a shallow cut along Fenris's flank. The alpha roared in pain and fury, rounding on me with murder in his eyes. "You'll pay for that with your life," he snarled. What followed was a desperate dance of survival. I dodged and weaved, using every trick Elena had taught me to stay just out of Fenris's reach. But I knew I couldn't keep it up forever. The alpha was too strong, too experienced. It was only a matter of time before he wore me down. As I felt my strength beginning to flag, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Elena, battered but unbowed, was struggling to her feet. Our eyes met, and a moment of understanding passed between us. I feinted to the left, drawing Fenris's attention. The alpha took the bait, lunging forward with his full strength, but instead of dodging, I dropped to the ground and rolled. Fenris's momentum carried him forward, right into the path of Elena's silver sword. The blade plunged deep into the alpha's chest, emerging from his back in a spray of dark blood. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Fenris looked down at the sword protruding from his chest with an expression of almost comical surprise. Then he toppled backwards, his massive form crashing to the ground with earth-shaking force. A silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the labored breathing of the combatants. The other werewolves, seeing their leader fall, began to retreat. Some fled into the night, while others simply collapsed, the fight gone out of them. As the adrenaline of battle faded, I became aware of my own injuries. Cuts, bruises, and what felt like at least one cracked rib. But I was alive. We had won. Elena limped over to me, her face pale with blood loss but her eyes shining with fierce pride. "It's over," she said softly. "We did it." I nodded, too exhausted for words. Around us, the other hunters were securing the area, tending to the wounded, and making sure no werewolves escaped into the city. The night's events would be explained away as a gang fight or some other mundane violence. The people of Orlando would never know how close they had come to having their world turned upside down. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I found myself standing by the edge of Lake Eola. The water was calm, reflecting the fading stars and the slowly brightening sky. It was beautiful, peaceful in a way that seemed almost obscene after the violence of the night. Diego joined me, his arm in a makeshift sling. "Hell of a night," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. I nodded, still struggling to process everything that had happened. "What happens now?" I asked. Diego shrugged his good shoulder. "We clean up, we heal, and we get ready for the next threat, because there's always a next threat." I thought about my old life, about the job and the friends and the simple pleasures I had left behind. For a moment, I felt a pang of longing for that simpler existence. But then I looked at Diego, at Elena, and the other hunters who had risked everything to keep the darkness at bay, and I knew there was no going back. "I'm in," I said simply. Diego clapped me on the shoulder, a grin spreading across his battered face. "Welcome to the team, rookie. Get some rest. Training starts tomorrow." As I watched the sun rise over Orlando, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Exhaustion, fear, exhilaration, and a deep sense of purpose that I had never known before. The city was waking up, its inhabitants blissfully unaware of the battle that had been fought on their behalf. And that, I realized, was the point. We fought so that others didn't have to. We faced the darkness so that others could live in the light. The Werewolf of Orlando had been defeated, but I knew this was just the beginning. There would be other monsters, other battles. But for now, in this moment between night and day, I allowed myself to feel the simple joy of survival and the pride of knowing that I had made a difference. As I turned away from the lake and followed Diego back to our makeshift base, I cast one last look at the city skyline. Orlando would never look the same to me again, but that was okay. I had found my place in this hidden world, and I was ready for whatever came next. The war against the darkness would go on, and I would be there, standing on the front lines, ready to face whatever horrors the night might bring. Because now I knew the truth. Monsters were real, but so were monster hunters. And as long as there were people willing to stand against the darkness, there was hope. The sun climbed higher in the sky, chasing away the last shadows of night. And with it came the promise of a new day and new battles to be fought. The Werewolf of Orlando was gone, but the fight for Orlando, for all of humanity, would continue. And I would be there, silver knife in hand, ready to face whatever came next. The night air was thick with an eerie stillness as I, Joseph, a 27-year-old adventurer, found myself driving through the winding roads of Pennsylvania's endless mountains. Little did I know that this journey would become a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my days. It was supposed to be a simple camping trip, a chance to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and reconnect with nature. But as the full moon rose over the dense forest, casting long shadows across my path, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The first sign of trouble came when my car's engine sputtered and died, leaving me stranded on a lonely stretch of road miles from the nearest town. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. With no cell phone signal and no other choice, I grabbed my backpack and flashlight, deciding to hike to the nearest campground I had spotted on my map earlier. The forest loomed before me, a wall of darkness that seemed to swallow the beam of my flashlight. As I ventured deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, creating shifting patterns on the forest floor that played tricks on my eyes. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I frantically scanned the surrounding darkness. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the snap of a twig. I ran. Branches whipped at my face as I tore through the underbrush, blind panic driving me forward. The sound of heavy footfalls and ragged breathing filled my ears, but I couldn't tell if it was my own or something else's. Suddenly, I burst into a small clearing, the moonlight illuminating a scene that would be forever seared into my memory. There, in the center of the clearing, stood a creature straight out of my worst nightmares. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with a body that was a horrifying amalgamation of man and wolf. Coarse, matted fur covered its muscular frame, and its hands ended in razor-sharp claws that glinted in the moonlight. But it was the face that truly terrified me, a twisted, elongated snout filled with yellowed fangs, and eyes that glowed with an otherworldly hunger. Our gazes locked, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a bone-chilling howl that echoed through the mountains, the werewolf lunged at me. I dove to the side, feeling the rush of air as its claws barely missed my back. Scrambling to my feet, I ran again, this time with renewed desperation. The werewolf's howls filled the night, seeming to come from all directions at once. As I ran, my mind raced with fragments of local legends I had dismissed as mere folklore. Stories of hikers gone missing, of strange howls echoing through the mountains on full moon nights. Now, faced with the terrifying reality, I cursed my own skepticism. The chase seemed to go on for hours, though it was probably only minutes. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but the sound of the creature crashing through the undergrowth behind me kept me moving. Just when I thought I couldn't run any further, I spotted a glimmer of hope. A dilapidated cabin nestled among the trees. With the last of my strength, I sprinted towards it, praying that it would offer some form of sanctuary. I burst through the rotting door, slamming it shut behind me and frantically searching for something to barricade it. An old wooden table served the purpose, and I shoved it against the door just as the werewolf slammed into it from the outside. The cabin shook with the impact, dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. I backed away, my eyes darting around the single room for any kind of weapon. An old fireplace poker leaned against the wall, and I snatched it up, holding it before me like a sword. The werewolf's claws tore at the door, splinters flying as it tried to force its way in. I could hear its heavy breathing, smell its rank animal odor. Each impact made the table shift a little more, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it broke through. As I stood there, trembling and waiting for the inevitable, my eyes fell upon something I hadn't noticed before. A trap door in the floor, partially hidden beneath a moldy rug. Without hesitation, I flung the rug aside and yanked open the trap door, revealing a dark hole beneath. Just as I lowered myself into the opening, the cabin door finally gave way with a thunderous crash. I caught a glimpse of the werewolf's massive form filling the doorway before I dropped into the darkness below, pulling the trap door shut above me. I found myself in a narrow tunnel, the earthen walls close on either side. The sound of the werewolf's fury echoed from above, and I knew I had only moments before it discovered my escape route. Clutching the fireplace poker, I began to crawl through the tunnel, having no idea where it led, but knowing that anywhere was better than where I had been. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning beneath the forest floor. My knees and hands were raw from crawling, and the musty air made it difficult to breathe. But the sounds of pursuit drove me onward, the werewolf's howls growing more distant as I put more distance between us. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. Hope surged through me as I quickened my pace, emerging from the tunnel into a small cave opening on the side of a cliff. The full moon hung low in the sky, bathing the forest below in its silvery light. I gulped in the fresh air, my legs shaking as the adrenaline began to wear off. But my relief was short-lived as a mournful howl echoed through the night, reminding me that the danger was far from over. I knew I couldn't stay in one place for long. The werewolf was still out there, and its heightened senses would eventually lead it to me. With no other choice, I began to make my way down the rocky cliff face, using roots and small ledges as handholds. As I descended, my mind raced with questions. What was this creature? How long had it been terrorizing these mountains? And most importantly, how could I hope to survive until dawn? The forest below seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction, a sea of darkness punctuated by the occasional glimmer of moonlight on leaves. I had no idea which way led to safety, or if there was any safe place at all in this nightmare realm. Just as my feet touched the forest floor, a twig snapped nearby, freezing me in place. The sound of heavy breathing filled the air, and I slowly turned to see the werewolf emerging from the shadows, its eyes locked on me with predatory focus. In that moment, I knew that this was it, the final confrontation. There was nowhere left to run, no more tricks up my sleeve. It was just me, armed with nothing but a fireplace poker, against a creature of myth and nightmare. The werewolf circled me slowly, its massive form rippling with barely contained power. I held the poker before me, trying to keep it at bay, but I knew it was a futile gesture. This creature could tear me apart with a single swipe of its claws. As it lunged forward, I swung the poker with all my might, connecting with its snout. The werewolf yelped in pain and surprise, backing off momentarily, but the blow only seemed to enrage it further, and it came at me again with renewed fury. What followed was a desperate dance of survival. I dodged and weaved, using the trees as cover, striking out whenever I could with my makeshift weapon. But for every blow I landed, the werewolf's claws found purchase, tearing at my clothes and skin. I was tiring quickly, my movements becoming slower and more clumsy. The werewolf, on the other hand, seemed tireless, its attacks growing more ferocious with each passing moment. I knew that I couldn't keep this up much longer. In a last desperate move, I feinted to one side before diving between the werewolf's legs, scrambling to my feet behind it. But as I turned to run, my foot caught on a root, sending me sprawling to the ground. I rolled onto my back, holding the poker up in a final futile defense as the werewolf loomed over me. Its jaws opened wide, saliva dripping from its fangs as it prepared to deliver the killing blow. But just as I thought all was lost, a brilliant light burst through the trees, momentarily blinding both me and the creature. The werewolf howled in pain and confusion, backing away from the light. As my eyes adjusted, I realized what was happening. The sun was rising. The first rays of dawn were breaking through the forest canopy, driving back the darkness of the night. The werewolf thrashed and howled as the sunlight touched its fur. Before my disbelieving eyes, its form began to shift and change. Fur receded, claws retracted, and the bestial features melted away to reveal something even more shocking. A human face. Where the monster had stood moments before, there was now a man, naked, confused, and clearly in pain. He looked at me with wild, terrified eyes before turning and fleeing into the forest, leaving me alone in the growing light of day. I lay there for a long time, my body aching, my mind struggling to process what I had just experienced. The forest around me, which had been a realm of terror throughout the night, now seemed almost peaceful in the soft morning light. Eventually, I found the strength to stand, using the poker as a makeshift cane. I began the long, painful journey back towards civilization, knowing that my life would never be the same. As I walked, I couldn't shake the image of the werewolf's human face from my mind. Who was he? Did he know what he became under the full moon? And how many others like him were out there, hiding dark secrets in the shadows of the world? I knew that I would never look at the full moon the same way again. The night held new terrors for me now, terrors that most people would never believe. But I knew the truth, and I carried the scars, both physical and mental, to prove it. The endless mountains of Pennsylvania held a secret, a legend come to life. And though I had survived my encounter with the werewolf, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger, darker story. As I finally reached the edge of the forest, seeing the first signs of human habitation in the distance, I made a silent vow. I would tell my story even if no one believed me, because somewhere out there, in the depths of those ancient mountains, a creature of nightmare roamed. And when the full moon rose again, the hunt would begin anew.